Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Genshin Impact video. So today, we're going to be talking about Skirk. Yes, she is going to be arriving in 5.7. We recently just got a brand new 5-star CRYO debuffer who is called Escoffier. As you saw in my reaction to the 5.6 live stream, we have a brand new freeze debuffer as well as a healer. Now, with regards to Skirk, those two, Escoffier and Skirk, are going to be very, very similar to the way how Mavwika and Sitlali work. Now, Skirk's kit, the reason why you're watching this video, is actually very similar to a lot of other DPSs we have in the game, and also got a couple unique things. However, the playstyle is going to be very similar to Verisa. Now, starting with her elemental skill, it has a 9-second cooldown and generates 4 particles. Her elemental skill has 2 variants, a tap and a hold, and they both give you the new ability or gives you a new resource called Serpent Stacks. Now, I'm only going to say Serpent Stacks because there's another word and I cannot be asked to pronounce it. So we're going to go into the tap. When you're tapping on her elemental skill, you enter a stance that gives cryo infusion with an increased AoE resistance to interruption. And one thing that's important is that when you end this state and there's no stacks left, it completely exits the state as a whole. Now, when you hold her elemental skill, she enters a hyper mobility state where she sort of floats around like Kokomi and sort of swims in the air, which is kind of interesting, I guess. However, when she uses that ability, she has a very similar ultimate to Verisa. Now, you know how you tap E, the normal attack, plunge, then tap E, normal attack, and plunge, and then you get your ultimate. Well, it's actually going to be very similar to that for Skirk. However, you're going to either focus on the hold elemental skill rotation, or you're going to tap E and get yourself as many stacks as possible to do a big nuke. So there's 2 ways you can play Skirk. Now, when I said about her ultimate being different, we're going to go into that. Her ultimate has a 15-second cooldown and she's got 2 different bursts. Now, one thing that's very similar is also to Mavwika. Her ultimate does not use any energy, so she doesn't require energy recharge. You know, the ER battering on her, you don't need ER. ER's a dead stat on her. Her main ultimate requires a minimum of 50 Serpent Stacks for a huge AoE attack, similar to Wanderer or Chlorind or maybe Risley when they use their ultimate. Now, one thing that's important is that each stack surpassing 50 increases the damage output. This is very similar to the Fighting Passion or the stacks that you get from Mavwika. Now, there's a maximum of 100 stacks. However, at C0, it's quite literally just unrealistic to get yourself to 100 stacks at C0 with Skirk. Now, her special ultimate can only be activated during her stance change, and it will buff 10 normal attacks by either 8, 12, 16, or 20% due to the amount of stacks that you have. Now, one thing that's important is you get an increased amount of damage if Void Rifts are consumed. That is a passive that Skirk has. Void Rifts are actually created when teammates trigger reactions of cryo, either frozen, superconduct, cryo swell, or cryo crystallize. And when each stack, or each, should we say, Void Rift is consumed, it gives 8 stacks and increases the length of her elemental skill and also increases the damage doing so for her elemental burst. It's a very cool passive and it focuses on interesting reactions that are different from the normal freeze. However, unfortunately, the way how Skirk is designed, yeah, Mihoyo said, nah, she's gonna be good with other people. However, her best in slot archetype team is going to be freeze. She has a passive where she gains a huge, and I mean huge, damage buff if the team is a full Hydra and full Cryo. Now, that is insane because you can have Hydra and Cryo on the team. Hiya, so forgot to mention this little thing. There's basically an effect called Death's Crossing that whenever anyone in the entire party deals Cryo or Hydra damage different or excluding Skirk, you know, it basically gives her a massive buff for normal attack and for burst damage. This is why, you know, her freeze team is kind of broken compared to other teams. Anyways, and her teammates are so restrictive that her premium team would involve and include the exclusive Escoffier, who is available right now, likely Shenhe, Furina, as well as the fact that you can have some downgrade options if you don't want to get Escoffier, which I don't see why you wouldn't. But if you really don't want to get Escoffier, or you just don't have the pools, then the characters that you would want to go for are either Yelan, Xingqiu, you would get yourself Charlotte, Cadmus, Citlali in case you fell to the bait of, you know, Mavuika and Citlali, Mika if you really don't have that many characters, and the worst of worst, Mona. Mona isn't a bad character, but regards to this team composition and the best teammates who would work with Skirk, those are the available teammates you have. Now, Skirk is not a melt DPS. She is not for melt. As I categorically said, her reactions are for freeze, and you could use her in other teammates, but realistically, it's not advised. You're going to really see a massive difference in damage. Now, Skirk's weapon is very strong. However, in my personal opinion, her weapon is personally not necessarily needed. You can use other amazing 5-star weapons in the game that are limited, but Escoffier, I'm making this very clear. Escoffier is a must if you want to have a very strong Skirk hypercarry team. Now, is she going to be bait going into Nod Cry? I don't know, but personally, as a cryo DPS, the last time we had a cryo DPS on this level or somewhat in the top 10 of DPSs was Risley, and that was back in Fontaine. Now, Risley is obviously going to get a damage buff with Escoffier, but Skirk as a whole, she's going to be very expensive, but she's also going to do a lot of damage. Now, that is completely up to you if you want to get Skirk or not, but my personal opinion is if you don't want to get Escoffier and you don't feel like hyper investing into a freeze team right now, then I personally would skip it. However, Skirk still can do really well with other characters, just not the insane amount of damage you want to get from Escoffier, because obviously Escoffier heals and she does cryo and hydro res shredding, so that's perfect. That's perfect for Furina, especially if you have Furina C2. Now, yeah, that's just something I gotta say personally. If you don't want them to, then you know what, you're gonna have to skip. It is what it is. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please do consider dropping a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new with notifications on public. Make sure to join the Discord server down below and check out all my other socials in the description down below. Guys, comment down below what you think about Skirk, about her teammates, what you want forwards, because, you know, it's only the first beta, and what can I say? We'll get some more information, maybe some new changes, maybe some nerfs or buffs. We'll see. Anyways, it's been your boy. Take care.